To us, another perfect year.
Yeah.
I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Life had always seemed perfect for Mark and Lena. Their marriage, built on years of laughter, shared dreams, and mutual respect, was a kind that others envied. Their home, nestled in a quiet neighborhood, was filled with warmth, the kind that comes from years of togetherness and trust. They'd grown together, weathered life's small storms, and created a routine that felt unbreakable. On the surface, everything appeared flawless. Mark often found himself reflecting on the little moments that had shaped their bond: weekend trips, quiet evenings spent reading side by side, and laughter that filled the corners of their home. He believed their connection was solid, something that time couldn't erode. They were partners in every sense of the word, or so he thought. But recently, something had begun to change. Lena had become distant. Her smile no longer reached her eyes, and the energy between them had shifted from comfortable to strained. Mark dismissed his concerns, attributing it to the stresses of life, but deep down, he sensed that something was amiss. He couldn't shake the feeling that the perfect life they had built was teetering on the edge of an unseen cliff. One evening, after dinner, Lena's words would forever alter the course of their lives. The conversation that followed was a storm that Mark had never anticipated. It was a quiet evening, the kind Mark had grown accustomed to. They sat at the kitchen table, their meal half finished, but an unspoken tension lingered in the air. Lena hadn't said much all night, her thoughts clearly elsewhere. Mark had noticed it for weeks, those little shifts, those subtle distance gaps that began to form between them. But tonight, the silence stretched longer than usual, and something in Lena's posture felt off, like she was holding her breath, waiting for the right moment to speak. Finally, she put down her fork, her eyes never meeting his. Mark's heart began to race, his instincts screaming that this was the moment when everything would change. "Mark, we need to talk." Lena's voice broke the silence, low but steady. She took a deep breath, as if gathering the courage to speak the words that had been festering inside her for months. I've been seeing someone," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper, as if the words themselves carried an unbearable weight. Mark blinked, certain he hadn't heard her correctly. "What?" The word escaped his lips in a mix of disbelief and confusion. Lena's gaze finally met his, but there was no trace of the warmth that once lived there. "It's true. I've been seeing someone else," she repeated, the weight of her confession hanging heavily between them. I never meant for it to happen, but it did." She paused, her voice trembling now. "Mark, I love you, but I can't ignore what I feel anymore." Mark's world seemed to tilt, his mind scrambling for a reality that made sense. The woman he had loved, the woman he had trusted above all else, was admitting to an affair. His stomach churned with the shock, a deep ache in his chest where his heart once beat for her. He opened his mouth to speak, but couldn't find the words. His breath hitched, his thoughts too jumbled to form coherent sentences. This couldn't be real. Lena continued, her words coming faster now, like she was trying to rush through the confession. "I've been thinking about this a lot, and I don't want to hurt you, but I think we need something different. I think we need to try an open relationship." Mark's eyes widened. The request hit him like a punch to the gut. Open relationship? His mind reeled. This wasn't just about an affair. It was about changing the very foundation of everything they had built together. He couldn't process the magnitude of it all, the betrayal, the loss, the shock of hearing Lena, the woman he thought he knew, asking for a life he couldn't imagine. The room seemed to close in around him. Mark sat there, numb, his mind spinning in circles. The weight of Lena's confession pressed on his chest like a stone. He could barely hear the words she was saying as his thoughts ricocheted between disbelief and a rising wave of anger. Open relationship? He could hardly wrap his mind around the idea. Was this her way of asking for forgiveness, or was it something she truly wanted? The question lingered, unanswered, in his mind like an endless echo. He tried to process everything she'd said, but the pieces didn't fit. His heart had always trusted Lena. They'd built their life on the promise of loyalty, of being partners, of never allowing anything to break their bond. But now, all of that seemed shattered in an instant. He thought about their early days, how they'd laughed, held hands, and dreamed about the future. Their connection had always felt unbreakable. How could she have betrayed him like this? How could she have gone behind his back and sought out someone else? Mark's mind flashed back to their last few months together. He thought about the quiet nights, the times when Lena had seemed lost in thought, pulling away just a little more with each passing day. He had sensed something was wrong, but couldn't bring himself to ask. Now it all made sense in the worst way possible. She'd been looking for something outside of their marriage, and it had left him questioning everything about their relationship. But even as the anger began to rise within him, there was still that part in the part that loved her deeply, that wanted to understand. He couldn't reconcile the woman who stood before him now with the woman he had married. She was still Lena, the woman he had built a life with, the woman who had once filled him with warmth and security. But the truth was staring him in the face. She wanted something he could not give. Could he really share her with another man? Could he live with the idea of her being with someone else, in their home, under their roof? Tears threatened to well up in his eyes, but he blinked them away. His heart was torn in two, pulled between the love he still had for her and the crushing reality of what she was asking. He didn't know if he could survive this, if their love could survive this. The silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Mark's mind screamed for answers, but none came. He sat there, lost, not knowing what to say or how to make sense of the shattered world around him. After a week of restless nights and endless internal debates, Mark reluctantly agreed to try the open relationship Lena had proposed. His mind screamed that it was wrong, that nothing could fix the damage already done. But a part of him, a weak, desperate part, wanted to hold on to what they had. He agreed, thinking perhaps it was a way to salvage something, anything from the wreckage of their marriage. The first meeting with Lena's lover was a blur of awkward tension. Mark forced a smile, but the sight of the man, confident, charming, and far too at ease, made his stomach churn. This was supposed to be his life, his home. Yet here they were, his wife introducing him to another man as if it were a casual arrangement. The days that followed were worse than Mark could have imagined. Every moment spent together, Lena seemed a little more distant, a little more lost to him. The intimacy they had shared felt like a fading memory. And every time Lena came home after spending time with her lover, Mark felt a knot tighten in his chest. The jealousy, the resentment ate at him slowly. He tried to suppress his feelings, telling himself that this was what he had agreed to, but the truth was he couldn't bear it. He couldn't share her, not like this. The pain of watching Lena slip away was a constant weight on his heart. Mark sat alone in their living room, the silence suffocating. Lena had just left to meet her lover again, and the emptiness of the house felt unbearable. He tried to focus on the mundane cleaning, reading, anything to distract himself, but all he could think about was a widening chasm between him and the woman he still loved. The open relationship had never felt right, but he had convinced himself it was the only way to keep Lena in his life. Now, as the days passed, he saw more clearly than ever the damage it was causing. The laughter they once shared was gone, replaced by awkward, forced conversations. They no longer held hands, no longer shared the little moments that had once meant everything. One evening, after a particularly tense phone call with Lena, Mark realized he couldn't do this anymore. The man who had once been his partner, his best friend, was no longer standing in front of him. In her eyes, he could see the love had faded, replaced by something else, something distant. Tears welled in Mark's eyes as he sat there, broken. This was it. The open relationship, the painful attempts to hold on to something slipping away, none of it had worked. He couldn't survive in this limbo anymore. The damage was too deep. He had to let go. The final conversation was inevitable. Mark looked at Lena, his heart heavy with grief and resignation. He had tried, but the love they once shared was no longer enough to bridge the gap that had formed between them. "I can't do this," he said quietly, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. "I can't share you. I can't keep pretending everything is okay." Lena's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't argue. They both knew it was over. The decision was made, though it didn't ease the pain. Mark walked away, leaving behind the life he had known, the love he had lost. As Mark sat alone in his new apartment, the weight of the past few weeks hung over him like a cloud. He replayed every moment with Lena Every conversation, every moment of joy and pain. The love they had once shared felt like a distant memory now, a fading echo of what could have been. He had chosen freedom, but at what cost? The pain of letting go was raw, and the emptiness in his chest seemed unfillable. Love, he realized, wasn't something you could possess or share freely without consequences. Lena had wanted freedom, but in seeking it, she had broken what was once unbreakable. Mark understood now that love requires more than just desire. It requires respect, trust, and an unwavering commitment. The freedom he sought now was won from the suffocating weight of betrayal, but it came at the cost of his heart. He would heal, but it would take time.